But he does, because it's getting late. But Nick, I'm gonna be your bad guy. 25 RS 0877. I'll repeat it, 25 RS 0877. It's a bill that has to do with foster care students being admitted to schools when they transfer to a different location. Any objections? It's probably going to go in policy, but I didn't go to that today, so I needed to get it in. Seeing none, it is considered introduced. All right, with that, we are going to get started with a presentation from the Children's Cabinet, and then hopefully we will start to work the budget. 20-30 minutes give you to kind of explain where you're at. I read through your handout, and I appreciate you coming to talk to us about what's going on and possibly how we can help, or be aware as session goes forward how we can help. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Melissa Rooker. I serve as the Executive Director of the Kansas Children's Cabinet. I appreciate the opportunity to address you formally today about the work that we do at the Children's Cabinet and the budget that we manage, which is known as the Children's Initiative Fund. The first page of my written testimony is really the background on the Cabinet as an organization. I mentioned the other day in testimony that we were founded by the Legislature. There is statutory guidance that outlines our role and responsibilities. The 7 itemized duties are verbatim from statute. These are the responsibilities our Cabinet has to the system, the programs and services that serve children and families in Kansas. Our governing board is made up of appointments made by legislative leadership and the governor, and the recommendations we bring you are the results of their deliberations based upon the reporting that we do throughout the year. We have a process for evaluating the use of the Children's Initiatives funds, and over the years, there have been different studies of our approach to grant making and the fiscal management approach that we take to these funds, and the responsibility to make our recommendations based on evidence and data. And we've been found to have a process that was developed long before I was appointed to this role. The process that we engage in the legislature did a big efficiency study of state government in 2015, 2016. Alvarez and Marsal was the outside consulting firm. They called our process the gold standard by which other state agencies ought to be considering the use of funds. So our board over time has been, has made recommendations not to continue funding for programs that we don't think we are seeing the impact and ROI that we ought to, or that there are other opportunities to do things for children and families across the state that might be important to fund. We operate in a world where the entirety of the Children's Initiative Fund budget is funded with the annuity that the state receives from the master tobacco settlement. So in 1999, states joined a settlement agreement with tobacco companies based on, I believe it was, false advertising practices. And so the settlement agreement is to pay an annuity based on the sale of cigarettes and the taxes collected. There is annual reporting that takes place, and the settlement agreement is distributed across the country to the participant states based on a formula that I cannot stand here and describe to you, but it is a formula hammered out in the legal settlement. And so I want to talk today, if you turn to the second page of my testimony, you will see a chart on that page, and it includes every line item in the Children's Initiatives Fund budget, not just the line items that are in the education budget. And I bring that here to you today for awareness, partly because some of you serve on the Appropriations Committee and have decisions based on the whole state budget, partly because it's really difficult to talk about the pieces of us that are in the Department of Education budget without also acknowledging the rest of the line items that transfer to Department for Children and Families and Department for Health and Environment. So the Children's Cabinet is a small state agency. We're a total of 6 FTEs, and to keep our staffing footprint low, we have an MOU with the State Department of Education currently. That has been in place since about 2015 or 16. Before that, it was DCF, and before that, when we were formed, it was an agency that doesn't exist called Social and Rehabilitative Services. So we have always had an MOU, so there is a parent agency, if you will, that provides support services, so HR functions, IT support, and fiscal processing. Those services are provided to us by the agency we hold our MOU with. So that's why there is a piece of us that is in the Department of Education budget, and you are hearing that testimony today. But the legislature has the power to add line item appropriations, so we transfer funding to the other state agencies on the list. And I wanted you to see the budget in its entirety because this year, given the way the budget is working out, given a reduction in the outlook on the annuity from the tobacco settlement. It was downgraded twice in 2024 by the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group based on reducing sale of cigarettes. It's the combustible tobacco products. It does not cover vaping products. It does not cover chewing tobacco, that kind of thing. Anything you don't light on fire and inhale is outside of the settlement. So the cigarette companies have done a nice job of shifting their client base to other types of products they don't have to participate in this settlement on. We have passed policy initiatives that I think are the right thing to do as a country to help reduce smoking and you know, deal with that, with the health impact of that. But that said, that is our source of income. So it becomes a difficult position to be in when the revenue stream is on a glide path to continually reduce, and we have no other source of income. So there is a summary on the third page. This is a summary of the KEY Fund, the Kansas Endowment for Youth. The endowment is the vehicle created in statute to receive the funds annually, the annuity. What you see here is the actuals for FY24. The settlement payment that year was $49.9 million. I think it had been estimated to be about $49 million, so it was really close to accurate. Our budget that year was $57 million, so for the CIF. And so the difference between what was received and what was spent comes out of the balance of the Key Fund. For FY25, the approved budget was based on a prediction of $45 million, but in November, Consensus Revenue Estimating Group reduced that outlook to $41 million. So when you do the budget projections with the new $41 million assumption built in, we ended up with a negative ending balance, and we cannot run a negative ending balance. So I want to go back to this second page table. And I want to talk through the different columns. We give you as a baseline the FY24 actual expenses so that you can see what was there in our budget, what was actually spent. We give you the budget as approved by the legislature for FY25. We give you the budget as it exists in House Bill 2007. I show you the governor's budget recommendation. I don't know that bill number, but I know there is a bill. But the governor's budget recommendation. And the last column on the right is the Children's Cabinet Governing Board recommendation for our budget. The governor's budget actually took the recommendations of our board, and that is the budget rec that she made for the CIF. We, as a board, voted not to fund several items that were added last year in the budget process by the legislature. They're good projects. There is a $5 million endowment. The proviso language put in the budget last year stipulated it was a one-time investment. We supported it. It is a one-time investment. It was not put in House Bill 2007, so thankfully that one is not one we're contending with. It set up a partnership in Northwest Kansas, the public-private partnership. We matched a $5 million investment from the Dane G. Hansen Foundation. We matched in $5 million of public dollars, these CIF dollars, and then they have an ongoing commitment. They have $1 million from the Patterson Family Foundation in 2024 and a commitment from Patterson that their board would take an annual look at additional $1 million contributions to get them to a $5 million contribution overall. The goal is for that endowment is to create a $25 million regional endowment to support childcare providers in the 26-county catchment area. It's a really interesting idea to us. They are working with us to report back on grants that they begin to make later in calendar year 25. We think it's a model that can work. Ultimately, it's a 4-to-1 match for the public dollars that they received if they meet their goals. So we think that's an important investment, but it was intended to be one time, and it reduced the savings in the endowment, basically. There are 2 line items. They are not on the table for this committee to vote on, but they will be in other agency budgets. $1.1 million for the workforce registry going to DCF. That is to support the child care workforce, to modernize their processes, to get them from paper-based to automation where they can go online and register for their own professional development coursework automatically and very quickly and easily produce the evidence that they took the course and earned their hours. It's easier on the state side. It should translate into a time savings, which we hope translates to more efficiency from our state agency side. Good investment. We're building it, and we are building it with other funding sources. So we started with pandemic relief. We've given them some of our preschool development grant, which is a federal grant. This is one of the types of projects that grant is intended in the guidance to. So we got approval to help fund it's a software platform, so the technology build had to happen. This $1.1 million would be to help with ongoing maintenance costs. There's licensing fees and whatnot. So the governor's budget has it as an SGF appropriation, so it is not reflected in the CIF. And we don't want it funded with CIF funds. We need to pull that back out of our budget. 1.3 for health and safety grant, 1.3 million to KDHE, child care provider health and safety grants. Another wonderful program for child care providers, recommended in the governor's budget as an SGF funded item. Our ask is please don't convert that to a CIF funded item. However else the legislature decides to handle those 2 appropriations is your decision to deliberate. But when you look at our funding table, this key fund summary with the negative ending balance can't stand. And the way to get to the healthier ending balance, the 2.1 million, would be to not fund the 2 items that we're recommending not funding. So that's the pitch for help us improve the health of the CIF. We are continuing to look at programs, and there's very little we have discretion over. There is one program, it's the Early Childhood Block Grant. Our board administers grants. You all appropriate the dollars in that line item, and then the board conducts a public RFP, we take applications, and we fund programs across the state to, so that is the discretionary item. We have the Imagination Library program was added by the legislature in, I believe, 2021. And we love that we've been identified to serve as the state lead agency for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. That means we are funding 50% of the cost of mailing one book a month at no charge to families to their home. Parents choose if they do or do not want to sign their children up. Children are eligible from birth until their 5th birthday. The welcome book is the little engine that could. This is how the books arrive. They're shrink wrapped. They have a mailing label. There's no other paperwork, no other advertisements. There's no literature that is like, this is the literature, the book itself. There are no flyers that they take advantage of this mailer. The cost is the postage and the printing of the books Kansas children are receiving. Since the legislature named us as the state lead, we have grown the program from approximately 25% of eligible kids in Kansas being enrolled to now we're at over 45 or 50%. So we've grown to, there's 77 or 78,000 children across the state receiving one free book a month. It's high quality children's literature. It is designed to induce family time, reading with your kids, and helping grow a love of books for children as one way of improving the pre-literacy skills that are necessary to succeed once they hit school. So this is a cool program. We have a network of local partners across the state, nonprofit organizations that support the other 50% of the cost. The Dollywood Foundation invests in the overhead of the program. They run the fulfillment centers and all kinds of other costs. They engage in contracts with Random House to keep the print costs down. It costs a very minimal amount per child, but we did just get a rate increase because the U.S. Postal Service increased postage rates 5 times in the last calendar year. So we were paying $2 in total per child. Cost is $2.20 a month, and then split in half for us and our local partners, but they raised it to $2.60. So we've been watching this line item, and it's enrollment based. There's kids graduating out every day when they celebrate their 5th birthday. We can work, but we're going to need to come back and rearrange some of our CIF funding to enhance the Imagination Library line item at some point. I think it would come from the early childhood infrastructure line item, to be honest. That is a line item we have only had for 2 cycles. It's been helpful, but if we were to reduce and move money around in our budget, that would be where I would take it from. I need some of it. We've moved staff salary and some of our overhead costs out of some of the other line items just for transparency's sake, so that it's more evident. So there's probably a third of that is funding some of the evaluation work and some of our salaries. We have special one-time projects. We've been helping with infrastructure line item, nothing that needs sustaining funds. So we've been very careful not to set something new up. But I think that is where, if I had homework to do with the board, that would be where we would talk that through. The transfers to KDHE involve significant funding for parents as teachers. That is statewide programs, run parents as teachers home visiting to help, and it's open to any family that's interested in signing up. It's not a means-tested program, and it isn't a needs-based program. It's just good support for new parents to make sure that they have ideas for how to engage in how to read with an infant, or how to play in a manner that helps boost child development related issues. And it's a good touch point in case a child might need some extra screening for developmental delays or that sort of thing. And then the pre-K pilot program, we send $4.2 million a year, and I don't know how many years we've been doing that, but probably since inception. I don't know if some of the veterans here know, but $4.2 million a year from our CIF funding goes to KDH or KSDE 4.1 million transfers in from DCF using TANF funding. Combined, that budget is granted to school districts to help offset the cost of preschool programs across the state. It's a pilot. It's about 20-some years old.
Yeah, it's a long-lasting pilot.
Yeah, so it might, for me, this is a nice topic for the special committee to take a look at when they're looking at the funding formula, is how preschool in Kansas is funded, because it's kind of a hodgepodge. You have a 4-year-old at-risk categorical weighting. Districts can bring special education dollars to the table. They could use general education dollars, but it's kind of a mishmash of different funding strategies district by district. And it's a really important stage of development for kids. So the only other line item, there is a line item for the CIF Accountability Fund. That is the evaluation that leads to the annual report that I delivered to the committee assistant. We produce that annual report as part of our responsibility to report out on our activities, and all of the reporting that we do are available online on our website. There is one other appropriations that probably is something this committee should be taking up. It's in the governor's budget. It's the $10 million recommendation for the Child Care Capacity Accelerator. That is a project we've reported out in the annual report. We've done a 1-year progress report this fall. It's a special project that the testimony does speak to. I'm sorry, I didn't put page numbers on. It's page 4. We braided together funding from 4 different sources that began with $20 million from SPARK, which was the American Rescue Plan State Fiscal Recovery Fund discretionary pool of funding the state got. There was a whole process for that I won't go into, but out of it, we received $20 million that was allowed to be used for construction or major renovation, which is like finding a pot of gold. That is really hard funding to come by. DCF transferred in $31 million of their Child Care Development Block Grant, federal grant funding, also ARPA discretionary dollars they had in that fund that could not be used for construction or major renovation, but could be used for major startup operations. The Patterson Family Foundation gifted us $2.5 million to specifically stretch the construction grants in rural communities, and we put $1 million of our preschool development grant in to do some pilot program work with specific grantees around the state. So we did a public RFP. We made 2 rounds of grant awards. The program has been in full swing. The Patterson funding and the SPARK funding are still spendable. The rest of the funding had a June 30 deadline. So I report to you that ultimately we anticipate 5,655 brand new licensed childcare slots will result from all of this activity from these grants. To date, we have opened 3,340 of those slots, and of that 3,300, 1,368 are infant toddler slots, which is really hard to access for many new parents. So we focused on, and 448 new child care professionals have been hired to staff the programs. So far so good. We are considering this a success. The $10 million would not go to any of these existing grantees. The $10 million would be to open a brand new round of grants, so new and different community projects could be funded. We had 3 times the need expressed through applications than we had money to give, all told, and so this was just the idea the governor had to continue doing this good work in communities across the state. So that is the decision, whether there is a desire to fund one more round of these grants or not. It isn't, these projects have to have this money to survive. It is not that kind of decision. So we've been very careful not to set up sustainability issues with the pandemic programs that we have been in charge of. I'm going to stop there because I expect there to be some questions. Mr. Chair, I would ask that when Q&A is over, there is a point of personal privilege I would like to ask of you, if I could have a minute for that.
I love points of personal privilege.
Okay.
We'll definitely allow that. Questions? Representative Wynn.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your, first, hello, how are you? For the accelerator, estimating, and you never know really the cost of a facility. What do you think that would provide? I guess you're more into slots than buildings themselves. How would that meet the need? No, it won't meet the need.
Well, yeah, it will help,
Yeah.
right? It's progress towards the goal of meeting the need. It's hard to say because our projects range from greenfield new construction to, hey, we have a duplex in town that the city owns and needs to do something with. Like our grant is a proposal to bring these two family-based childcare providers into that setting to operate their business, to convert the duplex into 2 licensed programs. So it didn't need a lot of alteration, but it needed a few things for fire safety and that, fenced yard, whatever. So it's the whole gamut, and we're really excited to help realize the dreams of local community projects. These are projects that require community decision-making, community coalitions that come together around the table. We actually required in the RFP consortiums to come together. So local government, the local education interests, local childcare providers, local business interests, economic development entities, private community foundations. This work has been going on across Kansas to bring those folks together so that we don't have a one-size-fits-all problem in Kansas with childcare. It depends on the community. Your home district in KCK has a density of population and a scarcity of slots.
The capacity is one thing. The need is astronomical.
Exactly. Out in a rural community, they may not have more than 23, 24 kids, but they don't have enough slots for that population. So the problem solving needs to be community-led, community-driven, because we can't come in with a top-down solution from the state and say, this is the magic way we're going to solve childcare. So we have loved every minute of the partnership with community coalitions and the innovation that we've seen in the way they've approached their issues. In some places, they have the space, they don't have the people. So we have helped provide funding to recruit and train and retain the personnel. In other places, they have an old nursing home and they want to convert rooms to childcare or something along those lines. We have a multi-generational senior community that has a childcare now because of this work. So it looks different in every community. People are trying to apply a per slot number. You can do that, but this is a multi-generational investment. This will survive more than this year's group of 5,600 children inhabiting those slots. It's year over year, new kids enroll, kids grow up, and so I don't know how to give you a dollar amount that 10 million will translate to 1,800 new slots. I can't do that, but it will move us in the right direction.
How much was the first grant?
Total, we granted 54.5 million.
That yielded 5,600 slots?
Yeah.
54, oh.
And then
Be a small
we, 20 million was the construction piece of that. The rest was other elements of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative McNorton.
Couple questions, if I could, real quick. First, when the Children's Cabinet was first set up, was it intended to survive only off of the tobacco settlements? And has that grown into more SGF funding to keep you afloat? Give me a little bit of history there, if we could.
I actually appreciate that question. The original vision was this annuity would come into the state. It would be deposited into the Kansas Endowment for Youth. The endowment would grow. And it is in statute, the interest earned on the endowment, which the statute says should be managed by the KPERS Investment Board. That interest reinvests in the endowment. The vision was that someday the endowment would be large enough to spin off enough interest to sustain our budget. That hasn't happened. Am I allowed a prop in committee? I know we're not at the well, but
We'll allow it.
Oh, boy.
this is not even up to date. These are the transfers out of the endowment over time. Everybody has special projects that they think would be great funded using these funds. The only funding we have left is on the key fund summary table that you see. So where we were predicted today, I think KLRD's own predictions, it's in the tobacco memo, Jennifer. You can see the history of the sweeps. We've had some lean budget years and things have been swept. Anytime there are 2 line items that come directly from the key fund and travel to other state agencies that began in 2014 when the budget was on, we could not close the whole of the budget. So, and those just continue. That drains the savings, and then the interest is less and less. So we do not currently have any SGF supporting any of our Children's Initiative Fund projects.
Okay.
So there's never been SGF put in, but yeah. So thank you for asking.
If I could. So this 10 million that the governor's recommending, I think we funded last year, is coming out of SGF.
That would be an SGF, that would be a one-time.
And just a question to clarify too, these grants are going to private childcare facilities, or is it only, what classification are getting those?
We consider our sector, the early childhood sector, is a mixed delivery system. There is no single entity there's no public early childhood system. Our program, these projects are all kinds, all categories: for-profit, nonprofit, public, private, faith-based, community-based. There's all kinds. Our reporting shows you, the annual report lists every lead grant recipient for the accelerator, so you can see for yourself the array. But yeah, we understand that there's no single system that's going to solve this. So we work with all types of programs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have found the Child Care Accelerator on the governor's budget paperwork. I just wanted to make sure it's not on your chart. Sorry, on your chart, because it's not CIF.
Correct. It's not tobacco. Yeah, so it would be, I think the proposal would direct it to the cabinet to manage. So we would put it through the process that we engage in for all of our grants. It would be public RFP. We would have external reviewers review and score. We would then shape a proposal for the board to consider. The board would take a vote on grant awards, and then we would manage them the way we do, and we would put them through the evaluation that we engage in. So
That's helpful. I just have a process question. When we get to working the bill, will we need to add that verbiage that would direct it to the cabinet to manage, or will Nick just know that? When we if I were to make an amendment, once we start working the bill, to amend, to build in this 10 million that's requested for the Child Care Accelerator grants, would we need to write in my motion to direct it to the cabinet to manage, I guess is my question. I just don't want to miss one of those details.
That might not be a bad idea.
Okay.
I don't think that'd be a bad idea. I mean, this would be if the motion is the $10 million SGF, this would be in the KSD budget, but some type of language to direct that to the children's cabinet use.
I think it's not the first good idea I've had today, but thank you.
Other questions? Representative Nguyen.
And I don't want to belabor the point, but I remember it had to be 2 or 3 years ago now. The capacity in Wyandotte County was something like 4,000. The need was something like 12 or 16,000. Now that's just one of the county. So I know you have more up-to-date data, and what I'm, what I'm leading to is that this is a key component because the need is so great.
The need exists. This gets,
Statewide.
it's statewide, and there is a supply-demand report provided by Child Care Aware of Kansas. It's so chock full of detail that it can almost be overwhelming, and there's something about it that I think is important to draw your attention to. When we started this accelerator, this anticipated need it's a number based on the census count. So the number of children in that age group that would need childcare was estimated in Kansas to be 84,000. That's a big number. Today it's at 79,000, so we've made progress. That does not mean every parent in the state is going to choose to enroll their child in childcare. So we can't know how many of those parents, how many of those slots are parents searching for childcare, but we do know from our own needs assessment work that 2/3 of Kansas families need childcare because all available parents, adults in the household are working. So about 1/3 of our families can afford to have a family member stay home with their children and don't, may choose, they could choose they want, a preschool program just to expose their children a few hours a week to a play group kind of thing, or they may decide to keep their children home altogether. That's their choice, their prerogative. But yes, the need is great. This is one tiny step in that direction, but it would be a step in the right direction.
Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Melissa. Quick question, and I hope I didn't miss it. Do you have a total of how much SGF was swept out?
There's a memo from KLRD that does.
Okay.
Yeah.
It seems to me like if it's over 10 million, you guys would have been able to do this on your own, and maybe we should.
Representative.
I know.
Several hundred million. So.
Exactly, my point. I knew it had to be much more,
Yeah.
but it seems like a small return for what CIF funds have been used where they shouldn't have been. So this seems like a no-brainer. Thank you.
Any other questions? With that, appreciate you being here.
Point of personal privilege.
Point of personal privilege.
I know you have a lot of work to do on the state budget. When I was in the legislature, I served on this committee in the biennium that it was created, the 2017-2018 sessions. And the committee itself was created because we had the task as a legislature to rewrite the funding formula. It had been repealed and replaced with a block grant that the court found to be an unconstitutional delivery mechanism. That work was involved. Your leadership on this committee harkens back to the tone of the work that we engaged in as a group. We have some representatives that served with me on that committee in that process. One thing that, it's just a memory that I want to share from those days. the whole theory of the case, the adequacy case for school finance in Kansas, really was resolved in Gannon through we were tasked as a legislature to show our work for the remedy that we delivered to the courts. So we engaged an attorney from Lathrop Gage, Kurt Tiedemann, to guide the collection of the evidence of our work. The theory for the funding that was put in place was the Montoy Safe Harbor theory. And what that was, to boil it down, I know Nick has presented on this, we decided to look at what would have happened if the Montoy, the previous lawsuit, had been settled, it was settled, and there was a target goal put into statute. We never met that goal because of the Great Recession. Gannon was filed because once revenue stabilized at the state level, there still were decisions not to go back and fund that final year and get the education funding up to the Montoy target goal. So the way we demonstrated the thought process that went into the financial remedy that we provided was to say, what would have happened if we as a state had met the Montoy target and just kept it adjusted for inflation moving forward? So the phase-in, the 5-6-year phase-in of funding was developed based on that concept. The Kurt Tiedemann memo, which was sent to Eddie Penner, we had Nick, we had Tamara, we had Jason Long, we had John, we had a great team of folks, but the memo outlined the math involved with predicting what that Montoy Safe Harbor would look like adjusted for inflation, because the court had accepted that number at one time. So we felt like that was a reasonable place to land. The cost of living adjustment, once we reached the settlement goal in Gannon, the reason for the cost of living escalator was to, once we got there, it was to keep us there so that we don't ever land back in court again. So I share that with you as probably the strongest memory I have from those days, and we will have a lot of discussion in the special committee that takes a look at the formula. But I thank you for that time.
Thank you for your comments, and I think we share the same sentiment around that. Let's figure out how to do the right thing and do it wise and build towards the future. So thank you for your work in the past, and we're in a better place. There's some things happening right now that are very good for education, and we want to keep those things going. What I would like to do today, now I want to prep you for, if we don't get done today, I have a 1:30 moved up for us as early as I could. That if we don't get done today, there will be a 1:30 tomorrow. We were trying to wait for Representative Johnson. I know he wants to be a part of this vote. Had some things happen and he is trying to get back here. But I thought where we could start is we could start with some of the discussion around 2025, the decisions that we need to make, recommendations that we need to make for 2025. 2026, we've heard on the last couple years. So if everyone wants to look at budget report that you want to pull out, and we'll open it up for discussion. There is one question I have on the, and we answered it, but all of us have slept since then. The transfer cash balance to SGF. Just want to get a little bit of clarity around that. It's all over a whole whopping $328. But I want to make sure I understand that account. Is that account going away? Whoever would like to re-describe this to me, or if we need to allow the language the agency asked, and I just want to make sure this is still what they feel like the need is. Add language for the authority to transfer the cash balance in the school district capital improvements fund to the SGF in fiscal year 2025.
Mr. Chairman, John Hess with the State Department of Education. So that money was put, when we got it back in June of 2023, it was put into the old school district capital improvements fund, which was a 2000 level fund that was funded by a revenue transfer from the state general fund. The following fiscal year, that funding mechanism changed to a demand transfer, so now it's an SGF account. So we have this $328 sitting in a fund that is no longer appropriated, that we can't do anything with, can't use it for anything, it's just sitting there. So we just want, if the committee could add language, just taking that money out of that fund and just sending it back to the main SGF. We don't even need it in one of our funds, just back to the main SGF. It's a refund to the state. So that's all we're asking for.
Get it out of here, okay. Just wanted to make sure we could, we understood that. I'd entertain a motion.
I'm trying to get your attention.
Oh, Representative Estes.
I move what Mr. Hess said.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? That was a tough one. Okay. We'd like we just gave the state of Kansas money back. Well, now we have, I just want to make sure Representative McDonald is okay. Walk. I also have a question. This could be for, maybe for Jennifer, on SGF reappropriation, the $23,875. What is the agency wanting us to do? The LBC deleted it. Explain that to me just a little bit. I want to make sure we do the right thing there. Yes. Jennifer, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Jennifer Light, KLRD. So of the SGF reappropriations, 2 of the 4 were lapsed by the LBC. One of them being the school district juvenile detention facilities and Flint Hill Job Corps, and the other being the special education state aid reappropriation. The agency, when they gave their testimony, requested that the special education state aid be reappropriated and indicated, and they can correct me if I am wrong in this sentence, but that the juvenile detention was not as big a concern for them, but that the state special education state aid was something that they would like to have reappropriated and continue to have reappropriations moving forward.
Discussion around that item?
Mr. Chair, for clarification.
Representative Steele.
Just for clarification, we're gonna, the need is to reappropriate 23,875. And what with the 2 million? I'm sorry, Jennifer. I'm
That's okay, Jennifer.
So the $23,000 is for special education state aid. The 2.1 million deals with the school district juvenile detention facilities in Flint Hill. That is money that is given to the juvenile detention facilities, and they had less students in those juvenile detention facilities, so therefore the 2 million carried forward. There is still 5 million going to the juvenile detention facilities in fiscal year 2025. The 2 million was 2.1 million is the reappropriation going in on top of that. So they were up to 7 million and something.
Is there a reason that the LBC deleted those?
Well, I wasn't in there, but I do know somebody who was. Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, this was just part of the universal global motion made to not allow or to direct sub-budget committees to take a closer look at any reappropriations. And until the subcommittee recommended the reappropriations, they shall lapse.
That is correct.
Yeah, go ahead and explain number 2. Oh, sorry. Representative Estes.
I'd just like to confirm that if that money is not reappropriated, it goes back to SGF? And that left in my voice was a question mark.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I'm watching eyeballs in the crowd to confirm. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So has their population increased, or will next year we'll be needing to reappropriate the funds?
I remember this was, this got down to such a little amount that we couldn't send it out to all districts equally, so they had to not send it out. Was that the correct explanation for this, Dr. Harwood?
So with the special education fund, that is correct. When we get to the special teacher reimbursement, we round down to the nearest dollar, and this is just left over. The reason that we suggest not lapsing, but reappropriating is just, we think it's a bad idea to get in the habit of lapsing special education funds, because you're actually reducing last year's appropriation, which is used as part of maintenance of fiscal support. For the juvenile detention fund, a change in state law, which talks about how often juveniles are detained, has made it so that there just aren't as many students detained, and so there's less need for that. And so the idea of reappropriating that and having $7 million doesn't make sense, because there's a good chance we won't be able to spend the $5 million that will already be there. So that's why we're fine with lapsing the juvenile detention money. We think it's a bad idea to get in the habit of doing it with special ed. The $23,000 is not the issue. It's the habit.
Representative Estes.
If the chair would like a motion, I'd like to reappropriate the special ed money and allow the juvenile money to return to SGF. If you prefer that as a split motion, I'm open to that as well.
I think it's fine as one if you have a second.
Second.
Seconded by Representative Steele. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Oh, sorry. Felt like we had enough discussion before. No, it's okay. We're going to do it at the end. Nick said we're good. What we're doing right now, and then all these will be just, and it's as amended. These are all of our amendments right now. And so the plan is, and I just talked with Nick to confirm that this will work. So we are amending 2007 right now, and it will be as amended at the end. However far we get today, if we have to pause and finish tomorrow, or if we get all the way done, but we will do the major motion of 2007 as amended at the end, just so everybody's clear of what bill we're working off of. Okay? All right. Representative Wynn.
Please refresh my memory. Thank you. What then happens to the state foundation aid, 9.8 million, and the supplemental state aid, 9.7 million?
From my perspective, it stayed. So it was up a line, and I'll let Jennifer explain, but it was reappropriated by LBC.
Okay.
The only ones that were deleted by LBC were
Bottom two.
juvenile and special ed.
Thank you.
Any other questions or clarifications? Let's stay on 2025. I mean, for the most part, what I am seeing is that concurrence with LBC there's quite a bit of that. So if anybody wants to do anything different, let me know, because right now we are in concurrence with LBC unless it gets amended, just to make that clear. So if you like what you see by the LBC, I feel like breaking out in song. But if you don't, then there's space for discussion right now and possible motions.
Mr. Chair, I blanked. I just wanted to verify. So we don't have to make an amendment on the 2025 because it will just automatically follow the LBC. We don't have to say we agree with the LBC.
Well, we've already amended two things off of
Well,
them.
that, yes.
But yes, if we were to move on to 2026 right now, what we have amended would stay, and what LBC has said will stay.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to go to 2026. No, that's the wrong motion.
So Representative McDonald first.
So we have the yellow paper, and we have the budget. And I can see where we are in the budget, but I'm having a little heartburn about trying to figure out the yellow paper, like how they correlate, because for instance, where it says fiscal year 2025, and then we look down a little bit, and I understand we just did the transfer of SGF to SDFF, right? Is that what we did? I'm sorry, I went to the bathroom because I have not had time to do that today. So I'm a little trying to catch up.
You're like
Too much
me
information,
yesterday.
but, like, for real, we've been really busy.
Understand. Keep moving, keep it moving.
What number are we on?
Don't start. We've got to get out of here. Don't start.
Sorry. She started it.
I'm just a little nervous for us to go to 2026 when I'm not completely sure what we just did in 2025.
So just to catch you up, we amended number 6 to match the agency's request and go away from LBC. And then we amended number 1 just on the special education reappropriation. And this is off of your main budget sheet.
I'm with
Those
you
are the
there.
2 things that we have done so far.
We're not looking at yellow.
We're trying to stay away from the yellow sheet. That's Jennifer's sheet. She understands that one best.
Perfect. Okay. And so we still haven't done number 2, 3. There's still several for 2025, correct? That we haven't talked
I would agree. There is stuff hanging out there, but right now we are in concurrence with LBC on HB 2007 unless we amend things.
I would just like a minute to try to catch up, if that's okay.
I'll split the difference with you. You got 30 seconds.
While she's doing that, I think Gabrielle Hull and Dr. Harwood are trying to save us from ourselves.
I thought it might be helpful to clarify that the Legislative Budget Committee already adopted the recommendations for our consensus estimate, which is on that big yellow sheet you're looking at.
Yeah, that's correct. That's already in there. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to let Jennifer clarify something on the gold sheet. I'd have called it yellow too, but I'm colorblind. So the gold sheet, she's going to clarify something, whichever one you want to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gabrielle is correct. The goldenrod sheet, that's the long one, is the fall consensus estimates, and the legislative committee did already adopt those. So those are adopted. That's items 4 and 7 in fiscal year 2025 that were already adopted. When you roll them together, that's the fall consensus. I do want to mention that on the yellow 8.5 by 11, I am missing something in 2025 that the governor's recommendation did have different. And so I do want to, for clarity's sake, for the governor's rec differences versus the legislative budget one, I want to make sure that we're clear on this. The governor did recommend going ahead on item number 5, the salaries and wages, increasing the salaries and wages amount. So the governor approved it right now in the budget bill, HB 2007. They are not included. Those 8 new positions for FTE.
Discussion. Representative McDonald.
Could we talk about 5 then? I hear many, many people in this building talk a whole lot about longitudinal data systems, how we need longitudinal data studies, and I know we've got a bill that's queued up for the next couple weeks regarding that. But when our Department of Education comes to us and says we need 4 FTE positions in IT to do just that, which is a grant that they've worked hard to receive, I feel like we should have a conversation about that rather than just skipping over it.
Does anybody need any further clarity? Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do we know on that how that's broken out? So let's say if we wanted to do just the 4 FTEs for information technology, but not the other 4, do we just cut that number in half or divide that number by 8? And, or what's the, I don't want to make it too complicated.
Dr. Harwood.
So I think it's really important to clarify that there are not 8 new FTE. There were 8 new positions, but there were 5 FTE that were cut. So the net increase was 3 FTE. So when it would be our position that when the LPC made the motion to cut enhancements, that would have been 3 FTE and not 8. So I think one thing to keep in mind is that the state board has self-executing power and can create their own FTE. And so what's happened is that we've tried to rearrange some FTE and move them around. All of them were with federal funds. And so some of it was actually IT positions that were building the early childhood statewide longitudinal data system. So that's part of it. Another part was an IT position for child nutrition to support that system as we're paying those things out. So it is, the increase is 3 FTE, but they were all paid for with federal funds, some of them through specific grants that the department got for the statewide longitudinal data system.
Representative McDonald. Actually, hold on one second. Representative Owsley had his hand up before.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Jennifer, I might lean on you for this as well, because if memory serves me correctly, this was also part of a general, broad, global motion that all FTEs shall be taken another look at. And I think I'm going to agree with Dr. Harwood that, you know, I don't recall the LBC spending a whole lot of time discussing the intricacies about where these FTEs came from, or the deletion of the 5 and the addition of the 8. I think we got into the need for them and why the department was asking for them. And I think that's when the global motion was made that we would take another look. So I personally feel like if this committee wanted to go with the agency's position here, it wouldn't be against the intention of the motion that was made in the LBC. But I obviously that's up for this committee to discuss and come to a conclusion.
Let's go to Representative McDonald. I may have a question here in a minute. Representative McDonald.
I was wondering if Dr. Harwood or someone from the Department of Ed could discuss this special ed services coordinator. And is this a new initiative? I know we just invested quite a bit in special ed. Is that related to that expenditure last year?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that is actually a position that is also tied to the new SLDS grant. It is just budgeted in the special education program instead of in information technology. Because the new grant is associated with early childhood data, so that's why in our early childhood program team is budgeted under special education in title services. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but that's what that's associated with, is the new SLDS grant.
Representative Estes.
I think I need a little clarity, Dr. Harwood, because I'm getting more confused. You're saying the State Board of Education has self-executing, they can take the federal money and allocate it how they like. So you are asking us not to mess with what is on the list and that you guys would like to decide those, and our real negotiation point is the amount of money spent. Am I understanding this correctly?
So even the reduction of the funding is actually from a no-limit fund. And so the reduction of funding from a no-limit fund really has no effect. I think the important thing to know about FTE is that we can only hire the people we can afford to pay. And there are situations where we do write grants, federal grants that we receive, and the statewide longitudinal data system is a good example of that. So when we get those funds in, we only have a certain amount of time to complete the requirements of the grant. And so we get started with that. I think every agency actually has more FTE on the books than they need, and there's a bill about that in there. One of the reasons that happens is that as our needs shift, we sometimes, if we have an open position in one place, we actually fill it someplace else because we've decided that's where the need is. Sometimes it's easier to keep those positions on the books so you don't have to create a new position as you shift. So I think the number of FTE is a difficult thing, which is why I think the legislature in years past took the FTE numbers out of the budget bills. So yes, in that regard, the agency would request approval of our 2025 recommendation, which was deleting 5 FTE, adding 8 for a total of 3 new ones, and to be able to complete the work that the state board decided needed to be done with federal dollars.
Okay, and if we do not give you this money, we are giving it back to the U.S. government?
So the money is actually already there. And so the LBC evidently requested the deletion of funds from a no-limit fund, which doesn't have a number associated with it anyway. And so I don't know how even budgetarily that works.
Me either. Thank you for making me feel better.
Okay, so how I'm understanding it, I just want to make sure I'm clear. This is not SGF funds that we are reappropriating. So I'm not going to get in trouble in appropriations, is basically what you're saying.
So there would be nothing to change about that part, HB 2007.
But the FTEs, the funding of those FTEs through those federal funds.
Is not SGF.
Exactly. Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just point out that when we accepted item number 6, the department gave the State General Fund $328, and they're only asking for $29 on this item.
Jennifer.
So the $29 is still there when we were doing the when we were doing the calculations. It is that the deletion came from the federal funds. In the bill, when you look at the bill, there are lines that have the numbers next to them and lines that say no limit funds. Federal funds are no limit funds. So, but due to the LBC's recommendation, we put in the dollar amount that would be considered the deletion from the no limit fund.
Representative Estes.
Okay, so you're saying federal funds are no limit funds. Are all no limit funds federal funds? In other words, can other things be no limit funds? Think of a Venn diagram. That's where.
Yes, Mr. Chair. There are special revenue funds that are listed out as no limit funds as well. These include the fee funds for most agencies. Some of them also include transfers to the that go out, the 7,000s. Some of them are also no limit funds. Some of them are appropriated. But when you go through the bill, you will always see which ones are no limit because that's what it says next to the fund when you look at it in the bill.
One more question, Representative Steele.
So when they say on the LBC, I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. On the delete 40141 from federal funds, I guess I'm confused because if the LBC is wanting to delete the 400K and then delete the 8, which still, I feel like we're trying to, I feel like in my brain that we're trying to fund something with federal dollars that the state already has, but we don't, right? Is that? I'm getting a nod over there. That's, we already have the funds there because it's federal. So there's not, so we technically would need to make an amendment.
We need to amend to, if we want to go back to the agency and allow the federal funds to be used, or we can stick with not using that money.
So I have one more question.
Representative Estes.
What Representative Steele has said is correct. We have the money, the work is happening. You said you wouldn't get in trouble in appropriations, but I think Dr. Hartwood kind of gave you a little bit of why you would, and that's because we never end up lowering the FTEs. But well, in an overall scheme, we're a state that our FTEs keep growing. I would still support this, but I just want to be transparent that that's what you're going to get in trouble for in approps.
I appreciate that.
We'll protect him, okay?
Representative Steele.
She said exactly what I wanted to say, Mr. Chair, is we're growing the FTE, which is a concern. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have a question before so are these FTEs, because in 2026, this is kind of my main reason for staying on this, there's another ask for FTEs. Can these positions fulfill what those positions are designed to fulfill? That would make me really happy, but
So the 6 FTE request that's the enhancement for 2026 is SGF. We cannot use federal funds to support state initiatives. So we actually spend a lot of time with making sure that we are paying people with the right funds when they're working on the right thing. So no, the 6 FTE that are request could not, the FTE that we're talking about that are actually people already working and have been for several months, then could not fulfill the position of the other 6.
I appreciate the clarity. Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Harwood, you mentioned that there are a number of FTEs that float around departments. do you have any federal FTEs that are available that are not being used that you could use for this?
So I don't know that they're in the right department and have the right job description for what we would actually be doing them with, or that they're right level. So that would be the problem with just saying, well, we're going to switch this person to this FTE because that position could be different. Does that make sense?
If we approve this request without the FTE along with it, what happens?
So leaving the dollars in there, but taking away the, so for which ones, I guess?
For this, I'm primarily worried about the information technology one, but yeah.
So for 25.
Yep, from 25.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
So, well, what would happen? So because we already have people, we already have the funding and we already have people doing the work. I mean, I guess we have additional FTE that we could cut instead of the FTE that those people are in there. So I think the total number of FTE would be there. My only concern would be that it should be 3 FTE instead of 8, because the net increase was 3, the net increase was not 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, quite frankly, what I think would work the best is if the committee could recommend the agency's request, and then we will, for next year's budget, we will go through all of our FTE and make sure that where they're at and work forward from there. Yeah, it would be difficult at this point because we're already almost 8 months into the fiscal year to reduce FTE that we are currently using to do the work that we already have the funding for.
Representative Nguyen.
And that was the point. I would disagree with your characterization that the net increase is 3, not what sounded like you're saying 8. Yeah, but when you say we're just increasing, whatever the words, I'm sorry, I didn't remember what your quote to get you correctly. So
I guess the other thing I would say is that, I mean, so some of this is grant work. And so when the grant expires, we no longer have the federal funds to pay for the positions. And so we would have to reduce the positions at that time. And so, again, sometimes those FTEs stay on the books. They're just unfilled FTE. We can start making sure that those are not, that we do a better job of cleaning it up. But the reason we needed the FTE, the increase in the FTE, was because we had additional funds to do additional work. These are mostly our IT positions where we have enough turnover. They're not worried about 3 FTE in the next 2 years when this grant is done. We'll have enough turnover to absorb that. Or at some point, we might have to say, we no longer have funding for your position. That doesn't happen very often in IT, I will just say that.
Representative Estes first. She was next.
You know, you have the rest of the calendar once we're done with budget. Maybe you would like a FTE hearing or hearings. Just a thought.
I appreciate that suggestion. Representative Hill.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I guess I'd go ahead and amend the underlying bill to add in the agency request on number 5.
Second from Representative Nguyen. Clarification on the agency languages, add the 629 or 692,076, including the $29 SGF for salaries and wages, and add the 3 FTE positions. And I would just, state for my opinion is these are already filled. Those funds are already being used. Once that federal money is not there, then we'll have that conversation. And I feel comfortable with the deliberation, and thank you for the clarity, everyone. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we add an amendment to that amendment that at the end of this fiscal year, those those 3 positions. So at the end of that grant, that those positions are off the books?
I think we have to stay on this amendment unless there's a sub.
I think she was trying to make a substitute motion.
I was trying to make a I'm learning, I'm trying to, thank you, Representative Estes. I would like to make a
Substitute motion.
substitute motion that at the end of this grant, that those FTE positions sunset.
Discussion on the substitute.
And I believe, and you are just simply adding your language to Representative Hill's language.
Yes, thank you. I am adding that language to Representative Hill's motion.
I will give you a second.
Let's double check with Nick here. Hold on.
She wants to substitute because if she adds it, I would have to accept, since I seconded the motion. No, she's incorporating his language. So she's doing a substitute. She's doing a substitute. Well, we got. That includes Representative language.
You want to give us any clarity here, Nick? Are we confusing you thoroughly?
Well, the thing that, I mean, we can make that recommendation, but the thing that my other revisers are going to need to be able to do is draft appropriate proviso language underneath whatever no-limit fund these positions are under, and then have a sufficient description of these positions, I assume, to kind of describe the FTEs that we're discussing. I mean, maybe we could get creative and kind of say the FTEs approved by this, recommended by this committee, but it just, I mean, we could certainly do something along those lines or draft some subsection to capture them, but it could get a little bit, a little odd, I'm just going to say.
Discussion. Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe for the maker of the motion, it might simplify things if we just added language to adopt the agency's request, and this committee recommends a review of the FTEs upon expiration of the federal grants, you know, of FTE positions. That way there's not a hard sunset, because I'm only assuming here, but the work that is occurring with these FTEs may not be completed by the time the grants expire also. So we might be borrowing trouble tomorrow by putting a hard deadline in today. And if we just make a recommendation to follow up with that FTE, that's might get the intention of the maker of the motion.
Discussion, question. Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious, would we be able to identify the grant that these positions from this grant, when it's done, they're gone?
Does he say which ones he deleted?
So, yes, I mean, we know what positions are funded by this grant fund, because we have to account for that with every payroll.
And I think that some of the confusion is, we don't know what your positions, and then we're saying these go away and these don't, but we don't know if we're cutting a position that makes sense.
And that's, back to the point I was trying to make earlier, when these grant funds are gone, those people will have to move into different funding sources, or we won't have money to pay for them and pay them, and we would have to eliminate the position. So the individuals will most likely move to another funding source, either through attrition, or it'll be back, we'll have a different grant that we're working on, or a different situation we're working on, and now they're getting paid from a different place. The only way we could continue to fund everybody is if we get an increase in revenue from somewhere. So either that would be, there's, SGF that comes in for a project we're working on, or there's another grant fund to cover that.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I really appreciate what we're trying to work to here. And I think it's bigger than this particular provision. And we're looking, I mean, Nick kind of rolled his eyes here a little bit. Well, it wasn't really rolling his eyes, but his comment was which 3 positions? Because if you look, we actually have 8 positions there. And so, I mean, that's the complexity of this that we're running into. And I would wonder if it would satisfy the maker and the second of the substitute motion if we had a promise to look at FTEs and how the department manages those and develop a more comprehensive plan for elimination of FTE when they're not being used and try to keep them more accurate. Would that substitute the spirit of what you're trying to get at?
May I speak? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the concern is that we have these federal dollars and then we have these employees and then the federal dollars are gone and now we need to fund them. And that's the concern. So if we can, then I will rescind my substitution.
And I will concur.
We'll do some clarity there.
In order to do that, we would have to come back with a request for an SGF. I mean, that would have to be another enhancement that we'd have to ask for SGF to do that. So.
Appreciate that. So we are back on the motion. Concur? Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. That is our third amendment in 45 minutes. We are chugging right along.
Can we work Sunday?
We might be working Sunday. Hey, you know what though? I actually like the detail. Let
me just say this too.
It's encouraging. Yes, Representative Wynn.
And Mr. Chairman, we appreciate your thoroughness and your attitude.
I got attitude. I like it. I like it. All right. I mean, I would like to finish or try to finish 2025 today. It looks like we are going to be back here tomorrow. Representative McDonald.
Could we go back to number 2 and get a little bit of clarity? This is money that is from the Children's Cabinet funds, correct? And is this money that is already in the bill, or do we need to make motions about that? I think.
Clarity from Jennifer.
Mr. Chair, the money for the CIF and the key money was not part of the global lapsing because that was just SGF and EDIF. So as it stands currently, this $2.5 million is in House Bill 2007.
Perfect, thank you.
Melissa.
Thank you. And I would just point out, those are funds that don't derive from SGF, which is why they were excluded from the global amendment, is my understanding.
Thank you for that. Any other concerns that are outside of concurrence with LBC for 2025? Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion that we approve the 2025 budget with the amendments we have discussed and passed.
Do I have a second? We'll give that to Representative Wynn. All in favor? Discussion, sorry. I always jump to vote because we discuss a lot before we do things. Discussion, Representative McDonald.
Thank you. I just want to check on number 8, just to make sure it's in the budget currently, correct? All the other adjustments? It's in 2025, number 8 on page 4.
Yeah, if it says no change, then the agency add of 1.6 stays.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to be extra sure. This is all new for me.
That's over here. That was done. Yeah, we were done number 8. It's a good check, but yeah, it would have read delete and repeated all the language if the LBC had made a change on that one. Continued discussion on the motion. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. 2025 is in the books. Yeah, we get applause from our peoples out there. Okay, now we're on to 2026. We are going to treat it the exact same way. We will add the global motion at the end, but we are going to amend it. We are amending and making motions for 2026 based on recommendations or ideas and attitude of the committee. Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At least in the handout I'm working off of is number 1 is special education. I would like to amend the underlying bill 2007 to include $30 million from SGF and that it be directed to the equalization formula managed by the State Board of Education.
So we have a motion to add $30 million to special education and be part of the equalization formula that's managed by the State Board of Education. Do I have a second? Second by Representative Schmoy. Discussion. Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I could ask the maker of a motion where we came up with the figure of 30 million. I had not seen that in anybody's plan to get us to the 92% statutory requirement.
Yeah, can I?
Representative Hill.
Well, it came up in my motion right now. Yeah, I think, there's discussion about what is doable in the current budget constraints. And actually, the current plan has nothing in it. And so the goal is to get as much as we could muster. And that appears to be a solid number. So I guess I'm not sure I quite understand the gist of the question, but it's what my desire is, I guess.
Representative Owsley.
My desire would be if this motion passes to follow it up with a motion for 42 million additional on top. I'm looking here at a 2-year phase-in of 102.8 million to get us to 92%. In 2 years, 3-year was 82.692. 4-year phase-in was 72.6, and a 5-year was 67. And I'm also looking at a piece of paper that says, in my district alone, we're short 23.2 million. So I appreciate the intention of keeping us to move forward. I just think this is a bigger deal and deserves a larger chunk of the pie, if you will, as it impacts every student in the state. We've had several discussions over the last few years. We know the impact of it. We were just discussing a lawsuit earlier. I'm not going to say that we're ripe for a lawsuit if we don't continue to stick to a plan. But I would like to see us keep making the momentum that we started last year. And again, if this motion were to pass, I think following it up with the 42 per the governor's recommendation, the state's board or the department's recommendation was initially 87 for their plan, and then the enhancement was 82. So if the enhancement request was 82, 30's missing the mark quite a bit. Thank you.
Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add that my district alone, which does not overlap Representative Owsley's at all, has a shortfall of $54 million this year. Thank you.
Appreciate the comments. You know, another thing to consider with budgetary constraints is the other side of the formula that we're under. In 2025 added 290 million. 2026, what we're talking about, there's, you know, with the base increase, it's adding 233 million to our schools. Then there's another 30 million. We're up into the 260 millions of dollars that we're adding to our schools. Is this everything that I wanted? No, but this is what I think we could do, and I appreciate the debate. I hope all of you know that I do, but this is a motion on the table, and I again appreciate all sides. Any more discussion? Representative McNorton.
Just a quick question, that 72 million roughly we gave last year and another 2.5 from some feds, did that come out of SGF last year? Do you remember?
Yes, it did.
Okay, thank you.
And it also went into the same fund that this motion is looking to put it in, the equalization fund that the State Board of Education manages. Continuation, maintenance of effort. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My district, 66, I know it's not competition, but we are backfilling 66 million, almost 67 million. And I just cannot in good conscience, after the conversations I've had at every doorstep with administration and special ed teachers in my district, you yourself said that at Dodge City, you had batches and batches of special ed teachers come in and saying, we have got to fix this. So I didn't come here to shortchange our kids, certainly not our special ed kids, so I can't support this motion.
Appreciate it. Just to clarify what I said, most of what they were urging me to do was, we talked about finance, but they also talked about, you know, just our decorum and our attitude in this committee. Those are the main things that they stressed to me. So trying to do what we can on all fronts. Appreciate the comments. Any more discussion? Representative Poskin.
Thank you for indulging me with a second time. One of the things I want to point out is that we talk about how our schools are constitutionally funded, and we're finally getting there with all of those types of things. Something to consider is that every IEP must be implemented. So when we short my district 54 million, you know, Representative McDonald's 66 and so forth, it's short, but those services are being provided. So what it does is pulls from the general education. So the special ed students must be served, and this pulls away from all of those things, all of the ROSE capacities, all of those things that were decided in the Supreme Court that we would get to just adequate. So when we pull funds out of the general education, constitutionally funded schools, we are reducing. We are not then really fully funding the general education students, and we are taking away from them.
Representative Owsley.
I remembered process. I'd make a substitute motion that we take the governor's enhancement request for special education funding to 72,632,866 for the 4-year plan. SGF for FY 2026.
Substitute motion on the table. Does it have a second? Representative Wynn. Discussion. Representative McDonald.
My paperwork says that the agency is wishing for a 3-year phase-in, so a 4-year phase-in is somewhat of a compromise. We would get there later, which is not ideal. but I think it's a good faith effort for our children and most certainly the efforts of our educators and our Department of Education. So I would be in full support of this. Although in transparency, if I'd been quicker than Representative Hill, I would have tried for 3-year phase-in. So today is a day of compromise.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't know if maybe we've got out of line, out of order, because this is obviously the biggest chunk of what we have on these reappropriations and stuff. So if we're gonna do 72 million, do we need to say if we're gonna do the 10 million here, the 5 million there, or do we, I mean, I'm just asking, I'm not pointing a finger or anything, but if we decide to do more for the special ed, obviously we can't do anything else. So, or in my opinion anyway. So just a question is all.
And it's not a bad one. This is the motion that we're on and substitute motion. I don't think it's a bad thing to, what's the analogy when you're trying to fill a pot? If you got rocks and big rocks, you put the big rocks in first and then the littler ones and then the sand, and you can fill the thing up. If you go the opposite direction, it's hard to get the big stuff in. I don't mind us debating this big one. And I know, hear me, I know it's important to all of us. I just also know the conversations I'm having around the budget, and what was mentioned is, at every door and teacher and educator that we talk to, special ed funding is top tier. And I hear you, we hear you. Also, in our districts and our constituents, the top tier issue for them when we knock at the door is, it's one of them, but the first one is property tax relief, which kind of goes in the opposite direction of how we do this. And so that balancing act is why we're all sitting here, being elected officials, having the party that we're having right now. So I just, pay attention to the tension. There's a tension there. And my kid is a special education kid. So I'm working inside these restraints just as much as y'all are, maybe more. And that's, this is where we are this year. And I think there's a possibility for progress and an understanding around progress, and it might not be all the progress that we all want, but it's progress. So that's my comment around it. We're on a substitute motion that has a second. Would we like to call that to a vote?
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the discussion. I can respect your position and the position of the committee, but this is going to be mine. And I would close on my substitute motion and ask for my affirmative vote to be recorded.
All in favor of the 72 million of the governor's recommendation on continuing the 4-year plan, say aye. All opposed? No. Recorded votes? Yes. Representative Owsley, Representative McNorton, Representative Poskin, Representative Wynn, Representative McDonald. We are back on the original motion. It failed. You sure can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee, for entertaining the discussion. It is extremely important to my district, and I can also respect that it is extremely important to everyone on here's district. I'm sorry that substitute motion failed. I do think 30 million is better than nothing, so I appreciate the discussion here, and I'll be supporting the underlying motion.
Further discussion. Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that that's a hard vote to take, and nobody wants to shortchange our special education kids or our gen ed kids. The fact is the rest of the stuff that we have in our budget also affects all of those kids. So instead of looking at it as shortchanging our kids in one area, I feel strongly that we are trying to meet needs that we otherwise would not be able to meet if we just put it all in one place. Thank you.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my districts don't feel the pain quite like some of the ones that were mentioned earlier, but know that I have a deep appreciation for this shortfall in special education, and I look forward to the day when we can say that we are fully funding special education, or that we're meeting all the needs that are out there. I didn't mean to offend anybody by the amount that I suggested. I just feel like that's the political reality that we can defend and get through, and I want to take something back. And so I appreciate Representative Owsley's comments, and thank you for your support.
Representative McDonald, unless I missed him. What did you want? Oh, let me go to Representative Brantley first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also want to reiterate what Representative Hill said. Thank you, Representative Owsley. I appreciate the comments you made. I also agree that this is not fun and this is not easy. Maybe an extended look, we can come up with some more ideas to help alleviate this issue and fund more for our kids, but we don't want to cut the rest that's going to affect them also. So, thank
you. Nick's going to do a clarifying remark around, basically the intent was maintenance of effort on that 30 million, but we needed to put 26 and 27. Clarify that for me.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So committee, when you are voting on the special education funding increase for fiscal year 2026, one thing we need to think about is, and often this is how we do it, we do appropriate special education services aid for fiscal year 27 as well. So it is our understanding that that $30 million will just be carried forward into 27 as well, into that appropriation.
Representative Owsley.
Clarifying question for Nick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That would not prevent us from next year coming back and adding additional funding.
Representative McDonald. Sorry, didn't mean to pass you up.
That's fine. I just wanted to make a point. When I sit on this committee, when I sit on Literacy Advisory Committee, when I sit on the Education Funding Task Force, I'm not just making decisions for Olathe and Blue Valley school districts. And I really have made an effort, and will continue to, reach out to visit schools across the state, because there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And I do appreciate your acknowledgement, Representative Hill, that perhaps your district is, or districts, I know you have more than one, are not having the same challenges. But to your point, Representative Getz, when we started this journey this year, it was a really great exercise to talk about the strengths and the struggles that each of our districts bring. It may not be the hill I die on today, but I really do want us to look and see where we can nip and tuck so that we can prioritize this as much as possible, even if we revisit it this year or this week. But I do appreciate the civil tone in this committee. It has been a refreshing change, and I know that that takes effort. And I acknowledge that you've got a lot of pressures, Mr. Chair. So I will support this motion hesitatingly, but a bird in the hand and a bird in next year's hand is better than nothing.
Did I miss anybody that's wanting to speak? Go ahead and vote on this motion. It's the 30 million special ed 26, 27, directed by the State Board of Education Equalization Fund. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. I would like my vote recorded on that one. How about that? think if everybody wants it recorded, you sure can. It was unanimous. If you don't want it, you can tell, but. All right, we have a decision to make. It is 5:25. I have the room at 1:30 tomorrow, and I'm here. We have a funding formula task force from noon to 1, and I'll walk right up here and we'll finish tomorrow fresh, and it won't be late on Friday, but we could do it fresh and finish tomorrow, and people could regroup. This would be a good spot to pause if I get consent of committee to pause. Representative McDonald?
If anybody cares what I think, I really would like to rest. It has been an excruciatingly long 2 days for me in particular.
I mean, I think the only one that's going to yell at me is Representative Nguyen. So,
I can handle it.
Representative Nguyen.
For the record, because you did not work last Friday, remember? Oh, you're gonna, you use your beads or something today? I would gladly work with you tomorrow so that we can look at further enhancements.
I appreciate that.
No, but really, you are different.
I'm different. I'll take that as a compliment.
That's a compliment.
Okay, with that, committee, again, thank you so much for your decorum and discussion, and we are on pause. I think we're in. I'm sorry, I thought we had this room, but we are going to be in 218. Okay, 218, is that Estes'? That's Chair Estes' education room. So half of us go there all the time. So should have space, should have room. If that pushes some of you to where you can't join us tomorrow and you want to WebEx in and you have something to say, please let me know, this evening or tomorrow morning if that works best for you, because you got to be gone, but you do want to be available. I get it. This was just as far as we could get with great conversation and great decorum. Very proud of the committee today.
Just remember that WebEx doesn't allow you to vote. You mentioned WebEx, and I just...
Right. Can't be on WebEx, but for public comment, because you don't get to do that in appropriations, so I want to keep it open here. So thank you, everyone. We are adjourned. 218.